This video is sponsored by World of Warships. On the 6th of December 1917, in the port of Halifax, Nova Scotia, there was a collision between two ships, which resulted in an explosion with the equivalent power of around 2,900 tons of TNT. To put that into perspective, it was over 250 times more powerful than the US military's Moab, or around 20% of the yield of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. At the time, it was the largest man-made explosion in history, yet I'm guessing most of you today have never heard of it. On the 1st of December 1917 in New York Harbour, the SS Mont Blanc was finishing up loading her cargo of explosives, ultimately destined for France. She was a 320-foot, that's 97.5 metre, tramp steamer, which was quite a common design for wartime freighters. After leaving New York, she set a course for Halifax, Nova Scotia, where she was due to join up with a slow convoy that was gathering in the Bedford Basin deep in the shelter of the harbour. Now, in normal times, the Mont Blanc wouldn't have been allowed into the harbour at all due to the dangerous nature of her cargo. I mean, in her hold she had TNT, picric acid and gun cotton, and on deck she was loaded with barrels containing a highly volatile and easily ignited mix of benzene and toluene. As it was wartime though, the risk posed by U-boats meant that peacetime regulations were relaxed and vessels with dangerous cargo were allowed in. U-boats, of course, are a key feature when it comes to this video's sponsor, World of Warships, a free-to-play naval shooter game available for PC. With multiple ship classes to choose from, you can conquer the oceans aboard battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, cruisers, or, if you want to hunt from the depths, submarines. You'll find over 40 unique maps with dynamic weather which have recently been updated with stunning new water effects and textures that make the game's seas virtually indistinguishable from the real deal. I mean, just look at this scene for example. There are a few white crests on the waves, a bit of mist in the air and the spray coming up from around the bow. It really feels like I'm back on a ship. Anyway, you can always count on enjoying fresh gameplay with new content released every month, be it new ships, in-game nations, cosmetics or even ship classes. Team up with your friends in a division or play as a lone wolf in massive 12x12 arenas. With a combination of ships, maps, tactics and playstyles, there really is something for everyone. Oh, and did I mention that it's also available on console? Download World of Warships using the first link in the description, and during registration use the code BRAVO to get some exclusive rewards for free. And if you play between November the 15th and December the 13th, World of Warships is running a treasure hunt where you can earn in-game and real-life prizes just for playing the game and inviting your friends. Again, a massive thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Anyway, after dodging submarines for a few days, late in the evening of the 5th of December, Mont Blanc arrived off the port of Halifax. Frustratingly for the master, they were a little too late because the submarine nets had already been raised for the night. She was forced to anchor and wait for the nets to open the following morning. Inside the basin, there was another vessel, the SS Imo, that had the opposite problem. She had already been waiting for her coal bunkers for a few days, then when they finally arrived, it was late in the afternoon so there wasn't enough time to complete bunkering before the submarine nets were raised for the night, forcing yet another delay. Finally, at 7:30 the next morning, HMCS Acadia, the guard ship on duty in the harbour, signalled to the IMO that the nets were down and she had clearance to depart. At the same time, in the anchorage, the SS Mont Blanc's harbour pilot received similar permission, so they picked up the anchor and started their vessel's inbound passage. It's quite routine to have vessels passing in both directions. When the channel narrows, each vessel simply favours its own starboard side, leaving ample space for the other to pass. Outbound vessels pass the Halifax or western side, and inbound vessels use the eastern or Dartmouth side. Anyway, the outbound IMO made her way towards the start of the narrows. In an attempt to make up for the lost time waiting for bunkers, they ended up increasing speed well above the harbour's limit. Now, for the IMO, this was especially foolish. You see, her hull was long and thin, making her directionally stable, and she was in ballast, with her propeller and rudder high up out of the water, making it extra hard for her to turn. The first inbound vessel she met was the SS Clara, which was being piloted up the wrong side of the channel. That wasn't a bother though, because the two pilots simply agreed to a starboard-to-starboard passing instead of the normal port-to-port. Although they cleared each other without incident, it placed the IMO further to the east than she should have been. The next vessel they came across was the tugboat Stella Maris, towing a couple of sailing barges up the centre of the channel. Tugs will often do this, simply due to the difficulty of manoeuvring with such a tow, but it forced the IMO further over to the wrong side of the channel. Remember, with their hull shape and in their ballast condition, it's not like they could change course quickly to regain their correct positioning on the western side before they met the Maris. Slightly further out, the SS Mont Blanc was continuing her inbound passage. She had cleared the submarine nets that had been lowered between George's Island and Pier 21 and made her way over to the starboard side of the channel in preparation for the narrows. They spotted the IMO up ahead and quickly became concerned as she appeared to be heading towards the starboard side, as if to cut them off. They sounded their whistle to indicate that they had right of way, but they received a 2-blast reply, indicating the approaching IMO was not going to yield. The captain ordered Mont Blanc's engines to stop and steered it even closer to the starboard side to try and give the IMO as much space as possible. Again, they sounded a blast on the whistle, which was again met by a double blast reply. By then, IMO had also cut her engines, further limiting her already limited manoeuvrability, though there was no way for the Mont Blanc to know that. Mont Blanc's captain briefly considered grounding his ship to get out of the way, but decided against it due to the risk of detonating his cargo. Instead, he went hard to port to get across IMO's bow. Suddenly, IMO sent out a triple blast on her whistle, indicating she was reversing her engines. As they kicked into gear, the transverse thrust from the propeller swung the stern to port, turning the ship towards the Mont Blanc. At 8:45, the vessels collided, with IMO piercing the starboard side of Mont Blanc around the position of her number 1 hold. The collision itself wasn't severe, but it was enough to cause some of Mont Blanc's barrels of deck cargo to spill over, flooding the deck with benzene which flowed down into the damaged hold. As IMO's astern propulsion continued, she pulled herself clear of the Mont Blanc. As the metal hulls disengaged, sparks ignited the highly volatile vapours. Flames started at the waterline and spread up the side of the ship, quickly enveloping the Mont Blanc in a thick black smoke. Believing his vessel would explode, the master ordered Mont Blanc's crew to abandon ship. From their lifeboat, they frantically shouted to other vessels that the Mont Blanc was going to blow, but their desperate calls were lost in the commotion. As they made their way to the Dartmouth shore, the Mont Blanc's hull drifted towards the western side, eventually beaching herself. On seeing the fire, Stella Maris, the tug that IMO had passed earlier, anchored her tow and made her way in with her hose rigged. Quickly, they realised it was no match for the blaze, so backed away. They were soon approached by the crews of a couple of naval tenders. Together, they attempted to secure a line to the Mont Blanc instead, to tow her off and try and save the wooden piers. At this exact moment, 9:04 and 35 seconds, the burning vapours ignited the explosives in the hold and detonated the entire cargo. The blast radiated outward at over 1,000 meters per second, with temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees C, that's over 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Mont Blanc's forward 90mm gun was blasted over 3.5 miles north, and the shank of her anchor, weighing half a ton, was sent hurtling 2 miles south. The harbour's floor was momentarily exposed as vaporised water and white-hot shards of iron rained down across the city. As the harbour refilled, it caused a tsunami rising as much as 60 feet above the high water mark, washing the IMO and the Stella Maris up onto the Dartmouth shore. In the city itself, every building within a 2.5 mile radius was destroyed. Over 1,600 people were killed instantly and over 9,000 injured, many of them blinded when their windows were blown out while they were watching the burning ship. Quickly, the rescue effort got underway with personnel from across the city and crews of naval vessels docked in the harbour. Out at sea, the USS Tacoma was passing en route to the US. She was rocked so severely by the blast wave that all her crew went to action stations, but they soon spotted the plume of smoke rising above the city, so set a course to assist. In the days and even years that followed, attention turned to working out what went wrong and who was to blame. Bizarrely, the finger was first pointed at Mont Blanc's captain and pilot, as well as the Navy's officer in charge of the harbour. Apparently, due to Mont Blanc's cargo, they should have avoided collision at all costs, regardless of the circumstances. All three were charged with manslaughter and criminal negligence. When the appeal made it to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court Justice, however, they found no evidence to support those claims, so the charges were dropped. The same thing happened in the civil litigation trial between the vessel's owners. Initially, Mont Blanc was found entirely at fault, but further trials and appeals found both vessels equally to blame. In the end, no one was ever convicted for any crime. Today, we look back on the Halifax Explosion as one of the most devastating disasters in maritime history, claiming the lives of nearly 1,800 people. As for the vessels, the Mont Blanc was completely destroyed in the blast. The IMO was later refloated and repaired until she was eventually lost off the Falklands after a drunken incident in 1921. The only known vessel to have survived is the HMCS Acadia, the guard ship from the mouth of the Bedford Basin. She's still in Halifax, now docked at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic for all to see. If you're ever there on the 6th of December anniversary, you should go and take a look, as I've heard that she still hoists the same signals she flew on that day. Again, I'd just like to express my thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Remember to check out their link in the description and use the code BRAVO to get some exclusive rewards.